Everyone, in honor of Quincy Jones, who passed away, or as we say it, got his wings on this past Sunday, November 3rd, 2024. And I'd just like to pay homage to his life. Now, he needs no introduction. I think the world, it's when you're a world genius and a worldwide legend, you don't need an introduction. We'll just talk about you. So, in this upload, I'd like to honor his life and talk about it. I'm always delighted when I do these and I do a tad bit of research on the person. And I always discover something that I didn't know before and something that was just delightful to learn about the person. And I'd like to share that with you about him now, and particularly delightful. I did not know that his middle name is Delight. What a perfect name for him. His name is Quincy Delight Jones. And what a wonderful name. What a brilliant name for him, because he did give us much. Quincy Delight Jones, born March 14th, 1933, and just passed away this Sunday on November 3rd, 2024. And as we all know, I mean, we know his work as an American record producer, songwriter, composer, arranger, film and television producer. I like to, in this honoring of him, because when you're wanting to pay any homage to a legend, boy, it's so difficult to pick out something. So for me, to you, and I hope you enjoy, I'm going to talk about what I know and you know too about him, my views of that, my experience, musical experience with him, meaning listening and enjoying. And then some of the things perhaps we didn't know. So I found him to be a wonderful conductor, and I'm sure you did too. I enjoyed watching him conduct big bands. I mean, jazz was really his first true love, and he was world known. And in my view, these are my words, I felt that he was a legend who created legends. He's a legend who created legends. There were very few big names that he didn't work with, including Michael Jackson, whose t-shirt I'm wearing today. There we go. In honor of this post. He worked with Frank Sinatra. He conducted the song for that Frank Sinatra sang, Fly Me to the Moon, which was the same rendition that our astronauts took on one of their first, maybe within the first one or two or three um, space shuttles to the moon, and they would play that song to remind them of America. And it was sung by Frank Sinatra, but it was composed by Quincy Delight Jones. Now, isn't that a delight? He also did the scorecard for the song, for the Sanford and Son show. You know how famous that dun 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 dun. Just I love listening to that. I used to love listening to that. But he did the scorecard for that. He did the soundtrack for Color Purple, working with Steven Spielberg and Oprah Winfrey, helped land the role that Oprah played, in which she wanted it so deeply and badly by connecting Oprah with Steven Spielberg. And by that connection came great opportunities. I found him to be the conductor who connected the talent. He would be a person who would actually pick up the phone and make a call for you instead of giving you the number or giving someone the number and hope that maybe that person will take your call. He would make the call for you. He opened the doors for others, many big names that perhaps I think we wouldn't have known their names if he didn't open that door. And in some ways walked them through it, I'd say. So he made connections. He teamed with people. He respected the talent. He absorbed the talent. He let the talent do its thing, I would say. Um, He was the recipient of many, countless awards, Grammys, and the Kennedy Center Honors, in which he too was a recipient of the Kennedy Center Honors. He was known to a legend as a legend. Now, isn't that remarkable? I remember a talk, I believe it was from Michael Jackson, but it could have been Prince, because I love them both so deeply. But they were describing him as the legend that everyone else wanted to emulate. Now, isn't that delightful? He really had a mastery of music, and in my view, because of his alignment with the stars, because as we know, or maybe you don't know, he believed heavily in astrology and he worshiped the sun, moon, stars type thing. But with his spiritual based alignment, I feel that he made stars. He connected stars. He brought in stars. And he was able to carve a place that didn't exist before. Now, in my mind, I have always viewed him very similar to Berry Gordy. By that, I mean, these are my words, my view of his contribution to the music world and our opportunities within it, I'll say. I viewed him very much like Berry Gordy. Without them, that lane didn't exist. They had to create that lane. They had to carve out that path. They had to travel that road. And they had to bring others in with them. But while there, they began to establish unity within the music industry, meaning we weren't here before, we are here now. How can we best work together on the business side of it? And he was remarkable for that. And I'm sure that all he worked with delighted in him, particularly when they did the We Are the World, a charity song. We are the world, we are the future. He invited many stars, many legends, many big names to be a part of this song. And on the outside of the door, before they entered to record the song, was a big sign that said, check your ego at the door. Now, isn't that brilliant? I think that's brilliant. Even way back then when I read the article of that, when it first came out, I believe it was in Ebony or Essence magazine, when they said that he posted a huge sign that says, a big sign for big egos. And check your ego at the door. Because when you have such big names like that, everybody wants to lead. Everybody wants to be up front. Nobody wants to sit in the back, everybody is jockeying for position. Why? Because you've always been the main thing. When when you're when you're of the legacy of legends, you've always been the main thing. But in this room, he said there is no main thing. We're all doing this together for charity. And what a wonderful video. It's I'm going to drop it in the description box because it's wonderful to revisit or visit for the first time that much talent in one room. And so we all delighted in that. And so some more things about his wonderful life. Let's just take a look at his journey as just a jazz arranger and conductor, but working with pop and working with rock and working with across the lanes in the origin of not just music, but in theater, and not just theater, but in movie production. He was very successful in with the album by, of course, Michael Jackson, Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. Um, as I mentioned earlier, The Color Purple. I mean, that's forever. Um, that's forever a legendary film. And then he also had his private personal life, by which, meaning private contribution to the music world, in which he developed Quest music and Quincy Jones Foundation, a charity foundation, and other works that he was vital in creating. Let's just see what more we want to include in this wonderful life regarding his, let's say, his personal life a little bit here. In his personal life, beyond working with such legends, he remained very grounded. His activism work was important to him, and he began it way back in the 1960s, before he was the Quincy Jones that we know now. His support with Martin Luther King at the time for civil rights and the Civil Rights Act was, he was very much involved with that and the landmarking of that. He recalled that traveling musically abroad changed his perspective of racism. And when he came back to America, he wanted to be very involved with anti-racism and the correcting behaviors that lead to that, I'd say. So he very much got involved with the action, I would say, of the day in the early 60s. When he was 14 years old, he was involved in a car crash. And he was with a group of friends, and they were heading to a rodeo when a bus hit them. And everybody in the group of friends died except him. Now, I know there's this thing that we call survivor's remorse or survivor's guilt, and we can sometimes become very traumatized and paralyzed by that. Why did everybody die and I lived? And just almost like a guilt that people can carry when something so traumatic happens to them. I referenced in my piece with Dr. Ruth, she had a lot of many M-I-N-I and a lot of M-A-N-Y tragedies along her life, which shaped her views and perspectives, but also kept her captive, she would say, her entire life because of those occurrences. Well, Quincy had one. He had this one at the age of 14. So how young? How young? But it traumatized him such to the point he never wanted to drive. And he never did drive. He was always driven someplace. He was always catching a ride, catching a bus. He was afraid to drive, and he never, I don't think he ever owned a license. I don't see that he's not ever saying that, but in his words, he just couldn't do it. That was at the age of 14. At the age of 15, in which he knew Ray Charles all of his life, he revealed that Ray Charles introduced him to heroin at 15, but he stopped using it 5 months later because he just really found no use for it in his life, and he was very much dedicated to his belief in astrology. So that helped him steer clear of heroin. And as we know, if we can recall back the movie Ray, by which Jamie Foxx did an outstanding job playing Ray Charles, you see a lot of appearances of the Quincy Jones's character in that movie, but that how Quincy Jones tried to discourage Ray Charles to discontinue using heroin. But Ray Charles was already on it at an early age. The movie didn't really depict that he started it so early. The movie depicted that he started it maybe in his early 20s when he was already in the music industry, as if I believe the movie depicted that he got turned on to it by traveling bus with the band that he was playing with at the time. But the reality is, Ray Charles was already acquainted with heroin way before that, at, like I said, an earlier age. So the addiction had already set in. But nonetheless, Quincy Jones and Ray Charles remained very good friends in the same way that I would look at Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier. Those two, that tightness, that tight brotherhood. And Quincy Jones had reportedly been very despondent and brotherly saddened by the passing of Ray Charles and found it very hard to recover from the loss of his good friend. In the same way that between Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte. And so there we have that's a personal piece of his life. As we know, and maybe it's a good reminder that he had been diagnosed with life-threatening brain aneurysm in 1974. And there was not a long expectation back then in 1974 for his life to be as long as it is. Now he's 90, he's past 90 now, but they were afraid of a potential death soon. So his family and friends believed that his life was coming to an end. So they started to plan a memorial service for him, in which he attended his own service with his neurologist by his side. and, and some of the entertainers there spoke, and Richard Pryor, Marvin Gaye, Sidney Poitier, they were all speaking about him in front of him. And his neurologist had to calm him down and say, don't get overly excited. I don't want I don't want your brain aneurysm. And so he found that he was sitting in his own service, in his own memorial. And at that time, he delighted in how others delighted in him and in honoring him. And he made at that moment every effort to live a very long, fulfilled life, and that he would change everything in his life to not witness or not be the person soon by whom they were speaking. And boy, did he do it. He lived, 1974 to 1974 to 2024. There you have it, 70 more years. So, now having said that, I would find that very interesting to be in a service by which someone's speaking of you. So I'm sure he felt some kind of way, but it sure made him want to live on. I said 70 years, but it's actually 50 years. I apologize. But 50 years, some people don't live that long at all, but he determined to live a long life, and he actually did that. He did do more work. He had more work that was very critical and pivotal, and he stayed in it, but he managed a way to meditate and be calm in order to live with the aneurysm or live as healthy as he could. I'll put it that way. Let's see. He also had been married a few times. He has several children, but he was a very dedicated father and husband. And so you'll also find that. I'll upload his IMDb as well as his Wikipedia for your view. But at the end of the day, we know so much about him musically, and we know so much about him opening lanes, I think, setting success for people in such a way that the success is inevitable. Just use your talent, and I guarantee it is what it sums up to be, I'd say. Legend who created legends is his legacy. And I would call that a pretty accurate summation of his life. And it brought me great delight in offering you this summary of Quincy Jones. And I saw Sarita, and I'm sure that there's a lot of songs of his that you really would enjoy revisiting now in the wake of his passing. And, music that includes Shaka Khan and Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, Frank Sinatra, many big names that you can't call them all, Cyndi Lauper, and all of that wonderful, rich music that we still have today. So he left us with quite an archive, and I hope that you find some interest in visiting that and enjoying it. If you've gotten this far, please click like, please click subscribe, and it's been my delight and pleasure to bring this to you. May he rest in peace. Good night.